Welcome to the OnlineIPT in-service training for examiners. At this point, you should have already received an email from Ballard and Ty containing all the information needed to access the OnlineIPT, including the link to the site and an email address and password required to log into the site. Now let's go ahead and enter our email address and password. And then click Login. The first page you'll see is the examiner's homepage. On this page, you'll see your customer ID, district name, your name, and of course, your role as the examiner. At the bottom of the examiner's homepage, to keep you informed about what's new, you'll find notifications and updates and upcoming features. Now let's take a look at critical tabs for your role as an examiner, starting with the Setup tab. The Setup tab is important because you'll use it to maintain the teacher database. Every student must be assigned to a teacher. That teacher is not necessarily the examiner. The teacher assigned to a student is usually the language teacher. This may vary depending on your district. At this point, your district should have already populated the teacher database for you. You may verify this by clicking on the Manage Teacher link and searching for the teacher you are looking for. You can type the name of the teacher, for example, Robert Masser. We find Robert Masser, and he is in fact in the database. If for any reason you cannot find a teacher, you also have the option to add a teacher into the database by clicking on the Add Teacher button. On the Add Teacher page, simply select the school and type in the first and last name of the teacher you would like to add. For example, Peter Smith. Make sure you check all the grades associated with that teacher. In the Status section, you may indicate status as active or inactive. Leave the teacher's status as active if you are testing students associated with that teacher. Then, click Add to complete adding the teacher. You'll notice that a window will pop up asking you to confirm once again. Click OK. Now that we've verified that the teachers are in the database, let's proceed to the Oral Test tab. In the Oral Test tab, you, as the examiner, have the rights to both administer oral tests to students and resume incomplete tests if needed. If the Administer Oral Test and View Oral Incomplete Test buttons are not active, you need to contact your school or district to give you access permission to administer tests as an examiner role. On the upper left side of the screen, you'll see the Incomplete Oral Test area. This is where you can resume test administration of interrupted oral tests. We will cover that in more detail later on in this training session. In the Oral Test Quantities table, you'll see the number of tests available for oral test administration. In this case, we have 20. At the bottom of the page is the Administer Oral Test area. This is where you can search for a particular student to test. For example, today we're going to test Ellen B. After typing in Ellen's first name in the search field, we see that Ellen B is in the database. It is also important to know that you can also search using the student ID, first name and/or last name, and the date of birth of the student. Assuming we've found Ellen B, let's go ahead and administer the test by clicking on the Administer Oral Test button. Once you've selected a student to test, you'll be asked to verify that all the student information is correct. In particular, the student's grade, which may need to be updated. If you need to update the student's information, click on the Edit Student Information button and make the changes needed. Otherwise, you may proceed by clicking on Continue. You'll notice that a window will pop up asking you to confirm once again. Click OK. On the next page, identify the test type, select the test period, and the test date. Now, click Continue. On the next screen, confirm the student's grade. This grade will be used to score this student's test. Entering the wrong grade may cause incorrect test results. Click Continue. On the next page, select the test form and the teacher's name associated with the student. The student's grade entered on the previous screen determines which test forms and teachers' names are displayed in the drop-down menu. If you can't find a teacher on the list, click on the Click Here to Add Teachers link located below the drop-down menu to add teachers. You will then add a teacher as described earlier. Click Continue. By default, all tests start at the beginning of the test. However, certain forms allow you to skip levels, depending on the student's language skills. If the student has basic English skills, then you can skip a level. It is recommended that you start testing at the beginning of a test for a more accurate and complete diagnostic report. Now click Administer Test to begin the test. One important note before you start the test: do not use the back and forward buttons on your browser when navigating through the test pages. Instead, use the buttons at the bottom of the page labeled Previous, Save and Exit, and Save and Continue, which we will point out later. Click OK and we will proceed to the test pages. Prior to administering a test for the first time, review the testing and scoring guidelines found in the examiner's manual. An adapted version of the examiner's manual is available as a printable PDF document by clicking on the Administration Manual at the top right-hand corner of this page. On this first page of the test, look at the information at the top of the page. The first column contains the student information, including the name, the student ID, and the grade, and so forth. On the next column, we have information pertaining to the test that you are administering, such as the test form and the test date. The last column shows the school information, such as the teacher's name, Peter Smith, and the school and district information for that student. These three columns of information will be displayed throughout the test. You should begin the test by reading the introductory paragraph to the student. Following that are sample items. These items should be administered as a warm-up and does not count toward the final score. At this point, keep in mind that you should have the actual test pictures in front of the student while you face the monitor during testing. As we scroll down further on the test page, you'll see a picture corresponding to the test questions. It is the same picture that the student sees in the picture booklet. Click Continue to advance to the next page. Each page of the test contains two columns: Examiner Says and Student Responds. Directions to the examiner are italicized in parentheses. Correct responses are listed parallel to the item under the Student Responds column. Refer to the examiner's manual for more guidelines on administering and scoring the tests. You'll notice at the bottom of the page there are three buttons: Previous, Save and Exit, and Save and Continue. As you move through the test pages, you may click either the Previous button, which allows you to go back to the previous page, or you may click on the Save and Exit button in the event that you need to prematurely end the test, for example, if you have a fire drill or an emergency. This will allow you to resume testing at a later time. The Save and Continue button will allow you to save the student's answers and continue to the next page of the test. For the purpose of this demonstration, we will quickly move through the first level of the test. There are 5 levels in this test. We have now come to the end of test level B. At the end of each test level, depending on the number of errors the student makes, The system will compute the student's score and determine if the student stops or continues testing. In this case, the student has made too many errors and testing is stopped. This results page shows the number of errors the student made, including the score level, designation, proficiency level, raw score, percentile, and so forth. At the bottom of the page, you have a choice to print the score information and run the diagnostic report for the student. Let's go ahead and run the diagnostic report. The first page of the diagnostic report shows the student and test information, as well as the test scores. On the left, you see a summary of the skills for that level. On the right, this chart shows the student's designation and proficiency level, as well as the highest test level administered. On the second page, you will find a record of the student's answers on the test. The items are organized by language dimensions and test levels. Green indicates items answered correctly, while red indicates the items answered incorrectly. Items that were not administered are indicated as NA. On the third page, this graph represents the student's relative weaknesses for each diagnostic dimension. For example, this student has a mild weakness in BICS and no weaknesses in vocabulary or speaking. Because this student scored at level B, there were insufficient items administered to provide diagnostic feedback on the other dimensions. On the fourth page, this table presents the IPT linguistic categories that correspond to the diagnostic dimensions where the student has shown weaknesses. On the fifth page, you'll find instructional recommendations for the weaknesses identified in the student's diagnostic profile. The recommendations are made from Ballard and Tye's instructional programs for English language development, Carousel of Ideas for K through 5, and Champion of Ideas for grades 6 through 12. For example, under the vocabulary category, it is recommended that the student receive remedial instruction on these topics from Carousel of Ideas. The page numbers for instruction are given in the right column. On the last page, you will find an explanation for each of the language dimensions. You may want to print this diagnostic report and file it with the student's records. Let's close this window and return to the test administration screen. You may now continue testing other students by clicking on the Return to Manage Oral Tests button and repeat the same process to test more students. In the event that a test administration is interrupted, you may resume testing by clicking on the View Incomplete Oral Test button. This concludes our OnlineIPT in-service training for examiners.